Hello, in this video tutorial, we will be talking about Unit 2, Activity 5. And so if we take a look on our course website, I posted an announcement this morning. And in Unit 2, Activity 5, you will be doing a review of each activity in Unit 1 and Unit 2. I know that we've already done our midterm exam. Uh, it was a little bit early this semester because of the way the dates in the semester fell. But at this point, we have now reached the end of Unit 2, and there's going to be 4 units. And so you're technically halfway through the online course. And so this makes it a really good opportunity for you to think about what you've already learned in the course. And so if we click inside Unit 2, Activity 5, and if we take a look, it's going to talk about how you've reached the midterm point of the course and about how it's time to review the skills that you've learned, both the reading and writing skills. And so again, reflecting on your progress is going to be the theme of this activity. They're going to start with a review of Unit 1, Activity 1. And if you remember back in that activity, we learned about the ways that we read, the forms and features of texts, and the purposes of reading. And so they're going to give you a few questions here that you can answer. Most of what you're doing in this activity until we get to the very end, you're not submitting to me. You're doing it in your notes. It's meant as a review. But some of these topics, of course, are going to come up in assignments and on your final exam. So you do want to continue to make good notes and to use this as an opportunity to kind of make a study guide, a review in your notes. And so you're going to answer some questions here on the forms of texts and the features in texts. And then they've given you some photos of different occupations, and they're going to ask you about the types of texts that the people that work these jobs would use on a regular basis. So you have a nurse, you have lost my place here. Come on. You have a nurse, you have a server at a cafe, and then you have other occupations here that you'll take a look at. And again, the purpose is to think about text forms and text features, which we looked at in our first activity. In a review of Unit 1, Activity 2, we're going to talk about reading strategies, which was the big focus, and it's going to ask you to review the types of reading strategies that we looked at. So making connections, predicting, inferring, summarizing, rereading, identifying the main idea. If you don't remember these, or if you need a refresher, you can always go back to Unit 1, Activity 2, and you can take a look at examples and explanations. In Unit 1, Activity 3, we focused on trying to better understand text forms, and we looked at different types of texts. And so what they're going to do here is they're going to give you a little practice exercise here where it says match various text forms with the respective sets of features. So they've given you title, chapters, plot, characters, theme, climax, and then they're going to ask you which type of text includes these features. And then you've got down here, for example, you've got articles, features, advertisements, images, indexed, publisher. And again, so which one of these types of text includes these features? So again, we're trying to put together text forms with text features. If we continue on, we've got Unit 1, Activity 4. And in Unit 1, Activity 4, we talked about the writing process, and we talked about brainstorming and developing questions and outlining and doing a rough copy and sort of preparing our draft and preparing our assignments, and not just trying to write them off the tops of our head, but to try to go through the writing process steps. And so what they're going to ask you to do is going to ask you to re-examine the sample paragraph on should cell phones be banned in theaters. This was an article, or a series of paragraphs that we previously looked at. And it's going to ask you to review it again and to consider the features, the important features of a series of paragraph expressing an opinion. And then last but not least, in Unit 1, we had Unit 1 Activity 5, and that was about editing and rewriting. And so it's going to ask you to, again, go over your series of paragraphs editing checklist, and to, again, make sure that you understand the concept of editing and revising. And that's just kind of a brief, or maybe not so brief, but an overview of everything we did in Unit 1. And the goal here is to just review. Just go back over each of the units, each of the activities in Unit 1, and make sure you understand what we focused on. It suggests that maybe you take a break here, which would be a good idea, because as we're going to see, we're going to jump from Unit 1 to Unit 2. And so we are now finishing Unit 2, so we can review all of the activities in Unit 2 as well. And so in Unit 2, Activity 1, we talked about inferring and summarizing. And so they're going to ask you to go back to your notebook again and to try to define and explain inferring and summarizing. So again, you've got a couple of questions here you can use, and your answers to these questions should make for a good study guide, say for the final exam. Okay, so again, these would be nice study notes that you'd be making for Unit 2. They've also got a video that you can take a look at right here. It's a commercial made by Air Canada, and it's kind of like it's not just a commercial, it's more of a story that Air Canada uses to try to sell their flights, and it's kind of an inspirational story. So it's actually a well done commercial. So they're going to ask you to take a look at the commercial, and then after you've looked at the commercial, to see if you can identify the 5 W's and 1 H from the commercial, and then see if you can do a brief paragraph summarizing what happens in the commercial, and then a brief paragraph where you make inferences, so you can make kind of guesses or predictions about what's happening in the video based on inferences, based on little hints and clues that you can find in the video. So again, this is just practice, reminding you about the importance of being able to identify the 5 W's and H, helping you practice summarizing, and helping you make inferences. In Unit 2, Activity 2, we talked about the news, and we talked about the different types of news sources, whether they be newspapers, television, radio, internet, reporters, tweets, word of mouth. We talked about all the different ways that we can determine whether we're receiving good quality, trustworthy news. And so if you take a look here, there's a little activity here again about newsworthiness, about determining whether something is worthy of being in the newspaper, whether an event is something that should be reported on and told to the rest of society. And so you've got examples of human interest, impact, timeliness, rarity, novelty, prominence, and proximity. These are our 7 pillars of newsworthiness. And then you've got some choices here that you can make to determine how important each of them are when determining newsworthiness. If we continue on here, you're going to be asked again to go back to your notebook, and you're going to be asked to use the inverted pyramid. So if you remember, the inverted pyramid is how news stories are written. And they start with the most important information and they go to the least important, right? You always start a news article by grabbing attention with the most important facts. And so they're going to ask you to see if you can explain how the inverted pyramid works. The inverted pyramid is a feature of a news article, and it's something that I would expect you to remember for future assignments and maybe for the final exam. When we get down to learning activity, Unit 2, Activity 3, we talked about narratives, which is personal storytelling. And so narratives are stories, so they have to have plot, character, theme, setting, climax, beginning, middle, and end. And so we talked a little bit about the plot structure, and we talked a little bit about how you can write narratives and how you can come up with ideas to write a good narrative. And so you should go back and take a look in Unit 2, Activity 3, and make sure you're comfortable with the different parts or the different elements of a narrative. Who knows? Maybe you'll get a chance to write your own narrative. In Unit 2, Activity 4, we wrote information paragraphs. So I would expect you to remember what an information paragraph is and how you go throughout the process of writing an information paragraph, how you use the writing process. You have a tracker sheet that you can take a look at here on how to track and organize your research. Remember, in Unit 2, Activity 4, we focused a lot on how to properly find and cite research. This is a really important skill that you will need if you move on to grade 12 English or college or university. You're going to have to be able to find good research and then properly put it inside of your own assignments, whether it be an information paragraph, whether it be a series of paragraphs. You're going to have to be able to show that you know how to use research. And that's what we focused on in Unit 2, Activity 4. Last but not least, this is the only part of the assignment that you are submitting to me. It's just a journal activity. And so it says, now that we are halfway through the course, it's important to reflect on what you've learned. In your journal, write a paragraph of 3 to 5 sentences to answer the following 3 questions. You don't have to write a lot, but I do want you to write something thoughtful. So question 1, which writing response or assignment in this course are you most proud of and why? So out of everything that you have written in this course so far, what do you think you did the best on, or which writing assignment do you feel the most proud of and why? Okay. Number 2, comment on the communication skills that you have developed in this course. How may they be important to your everyday life? Give 2 specific examples and explain. So see if you can think of 2 examples in your own life where some of the skills you've learned in this course, the reading and writing skills that you've learned, how they can be helpful. Okay. And then number 3, how have the reading processes you are using helping your learning? How are the writing processes you are using helping your learning? So we've talked about reading strategies. We've talked about the writing process. I'm curious to know if you've noticed any improvements, or if you've noticed that anything that you have started to do in this course has helped you improve your reading or writing. And as always, I've given you a Google Doc right here. You can just click on 2.5 journal activity, and there's a box. You just type in your answers to these 3 questions and then share and submit to me. Okay, and that's your assignment for this week. In the consolidation, it's just a wrap up. It's just going to ask you about how you're doing with your SMART goals and whether you feel like you're progressing with your reading and writing. And that's pretty much it. That's that's the end of this unit. Next week we will move on to the kind of official second half of the course, and we will get into Unit 3. If you're having any trouble with anything in Unit 2, please let me know. The course is gonna, we're moving quickly here. Before you know it, it'll be June, and we'll be at the ending of the course. So if you've fallen behind, or if there's anything that you need in terms of my help to hopefully succeed in this course, please email me. Please let me know. Other than that, I think that's about all I have to say for this week. Have a good week.